right. Joining me today is Ramaize Atique. Did I say the name correctly, Ramaize? Is that right?
Uh,
Close
Not
enough?
bad, not bad. It's Ramaize Atique.
Okay. All right. Very close. Got to make sure the pronunciation is correct. Do people have trouble with your name at all?
Since I was a kid. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. Well, anyway, you are, mostly known to the MMA community, obviously, for being Weili Zhang, strawweight champion of the UFC, her, English teacher. Um, So, I just thought it would be really excited. I was very excited to talk to you, actually, very, very excited. And a little backstory, in August, I went to China myself to be an English teacher.
Oh wow.
Yeah, things didn't work out myself, but once I stumbled upon, what you were doing, I was like, man, he's doing like exactly that's what I was hoping to do. Like this is so cool. There's somebody out here who's actually doing this, and with maybe a fighter's like obviously a lofty expectation, but it's like, yeah, if I can get Wiley, that'd be cool. So when I saw yours, I was like, man, this is amazing. This is the content that I am looking for. Everybody should be into this. So just tell me a little bit, man, about how, you got into being an English teacher and like what made you want to do that in the first place.
Okay. Um, it's a very long story, and I'm not
Yeah,
too
yeah.
sure how much time we have. Um, so basically, I actually wanted to go to the Middle East to study Arabic.
Hmm.
So I completed my bachelor's in English in 2010, and the plan was to go study Arabic because I wanted to work in translation. Now that didn't materialize, so I thought to myself, okay, what's the next best thing? And I thought to myself, well, I'm sitting on this degree. It only makes sense to teach English, right? So I got a what we call a CELTA certificate, which is a 1 month intensive course. I did that, and then I went to Saudi Arabia for 1 year to teach English. And then I came back and I decided to take things a bit more seriously. So I pursued a master's degree in English language teaching, and that's when I got involved in working in China. So I've been in and out of China since around 2015,
Okay, cool.
mostly doing contractual work on behalf of a university in the UK.
Hmm. Very nice, very nice. And I mean, I imagine it's turned out, pretty swell, something you enjoy doing.
It has, and sometimes, I think the best things happen without you intending them to happen.
Definitely.
And it was. I remember it was a very challenging time because I was studying, I was working, I just had my first kid at the time as well. It was quite overwhelming, but everything kind of came together
Hmm.
as things do. So no, I really enjoy teaching. I've been teaching for quite some time now. I think 7 or 8 years, and I've taught English to students from around 25 or 30 different nations.
Wow.
And worked in different sectors. Obviously, worked in the Middle East, worked in China, and I've worked for quite a few universities in the UK as well.
Very nice. Is there one nationality that's kind of harder to teach than others? Just, having taught so many, is there something that stands out?
You're going to get me in trouble.
Not to pick on people.
No, I think look. To be honest with you, they all come with their perks and challenges.
Hmm. Yeah.
What I will say is most of my experience is working with Chinese students.
Hmm.
So I know, people may say that there's a reason why I'm saying this, but no, truthfully, my comfort zone is working with Chinese students because it's what I really know quite well, and I understand.
Hmm.
I understand their strengths and weaknesses. I understand how they learn culturally. I understand the background. I understand what their parents want out of their education. So I would say that's my comfort zone. But I've been teaching for quite some time now, so the approach is 9 times out of 10, the approach is always the same,
Hmm.
but you have to adjust culturally. So you may have to change the context to um, make the learning more realistic and make it more interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely makes sense. And I mean, Do you know Mandarin at all or anything? I always figured, when I was going into it myself, I was like, I feel like that would be helpful. I mean, obviously, the thing is, like, you don't ever want to speak to them in their language, right?
No,
So, I mean, do you know any yourself?
literally, I only know a few phrases.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
again,
Hello.
it may sound like I'm making excuses, but the truth is, whenever I have tried to learn Mandarin,
Hmm.
it's always been counterproductive because, I mean, let's use Weili as an example. If I take time out of her day or the team's day to learn Mandarin, it means I take away their time learning English. So it's always been a bit difficult. Same thing with the rest of my learners at university. You know,
Hmm.
if I entertain that idea of, okay, teach me a few phrases, then it opens up the door to constantly using and speaking
Yeah.
Mandarin in the classroom, and it defeats the purpose of a language, English language learning environment.
Hmm. Yeah, see that always totally made sense to me, but it also was very intimidating. You have way more experience than I do. I'm still at the very bottom of it. But
So where were you in China?
so I went to Shanghai and
Okay,
then I went to Bangbu. So those were the two cities
okay.
I was in. Yeah.
For how long were you out there?
Not very long, not at all. Less than a month. So it would
Okay.
just, yeah. I ended up, wanting to kind of escape more. And everyone says that the easiest way to move countries is, at least what I read into, become an English teacher. It's like, I'll try it. Never imagined myself being a teacher, but it's like, hey, so very fascinating though, very interesting, which is why I want to talk to you and everything. Obviously, MMA is my area of expertise, so I'm curious. Obviously, a combat sports fan, right?
Yes.
When did you, become interested in? Did you see a fight that kind of was like, whoa, caught your attention? When did the fandom begin for you, if you can pinpoint?
I'll tell you, I think what was a major turning point for me. I used to be a huge football soccer fan
Mhm.
growing up, huge Manchester United fan. And in my late teens, it just became a little bit boring. I think, you know, my for the most part of my life, it was very much around football. So playing football in school, following the different leagues, and watching all the matches. And I think I just became a bit bored of it. And I remember my father said to me that there's this show on a channel called Bravo. Now, for those from the UK, they'll know about Bravo from back in the day. And it was actually The Ultimate Fighter. I'm not too sure which season, but it was a season where it was advertised or marketed as the Brits versus the Americans,
Okay.
and it was the one with Michael Bisping on it.
Versus Henderson.
So that was a big thing. That was a big thing for me, right?
Yeah.
Michael Bisping, guy from the UK, representing us, doing his thing. And I knew about MMA before that, but I think that was a major turning point in terms of interest.
Hmm.
And since then, it's just consumed my life, from watching all the Ultimate Fighters to following the fighters, the stuff on YouTube, the events. And yeah, so I've probably been following the sport for about, I think, almost 15 years, 10, 15 years. It's been quite some time.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, my 10-year anniversary was a couple months ago. First fight I saw was GSP and BJ Penn too. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, about 10 years ago. Good one to start with, but yeah, very similar.
very good one to start with. Yes.
And so is Wiley, is she the first MMA fighter you've ended up working with then?
Um, in terms of teaching English, yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Hmm.
she was. That's actually a funny story as well. So, without getting into, I'm sure you'll ask me later on how this all happened, but
Yeah.
I watched her one of her first fights in the UFC,
Hmm.
and I had been saying to my wife for quite a few years that I don't see anyone working with MMA fighters, or if they are, I don't know about it.
Hmm.
So, with the growth of the UFC, Bellator, other MMA organizations, and the fact that they're looking to get into different markets, I thought to myself, this is a very interesting niche, and it doesn't seem like many people are in it. So, I think a couple of years ago, um, I saw Weili's fight, and I said to myself, you know what? I'm going to teach this girl. I don't know how it's going to happen. I don't know what I'm going to do, but it makes sense. I've been following MMA for quite some time. Most of my experience in terms of teaching and learning is with Chinese learners. So it makes sense. It'd be an awesome pilot, and it'd be an amazing experience. And here we are.
Yes, yes, very cool. So, I mean, yeah, obviously the question is, how did you make it happen, right? Because I mean, at the time you started teaching her right before this last fight, right? If my timeline is right in my head, on your channel, Teach
So
Train and
yes,
Travel. So,
I I started working with her in October 2019, and I met her and the team in September.
okay.
Um, I met them in Abu Dhabi. So she was there at the meet and greet. There, in fact, there were a couple of fighters that I wanted to work with,
Hmm.
and she was there at the meet and greet. But you know, the issue with the meet and greet was there were so many people there, right? And I just didn't feel comfortable. My name's Ramaize, and I want to teach you. And
Yeah.
a lot of it wouldn't be a very smooth conversation because I literally had 100 people or so, 200, a few hundred people behind me,
Hmm.
and obviously there's a communication barrier as it is. So I thought to myself, you know what? I didn't get an opportunity. I'll see what happens. And I think it was a day or two after Khabib's fight, I saw her in the mall, and I said to my wife, I had my wife and kids with me, and literally I said to my wife, "Here, hold my ice cream. I'm going to I'm going to speak to the team." And when I first approached them, I think they were really taken back because A, they weren't expecting it. B, it was just so random,
Hmm.
right? Okay, who are you? What do you want? What's your background? Are you really even a teacher?
Yeah, exactly.
So I look. Sometimes um, these opportunities are hard to come by. So I thought to myself, here's my opportunity. What's the worst they could say? They could say no, and it really doesn't make a difference, right? Because
Hmm.
I've already got my life in the UK. I've got work. I've got so if they say no, it's not going to be the end of the world. So I went up to them and I said, okay, she's Weili Zhang. I want to teach her, and they were looked at me so baffled. And I said, look, it will be way more comfortable for me to talk to you if I were to sit down. So can I please sit down? And before you know it, it turned into a, I would say, 45 minute conversation,
Oh, wow.
talking about China, talking about MMA, talking about where I worked, and some of my experiences. And I started naming some of the places in Beijing, and showing them pictures. And I we exchanged details. I gave them my CV, my resume,
Hmm.
and I think they got back to me a day later or 2 days later, and they said, when can we start? So it was very natural. I think that was the biggest part in all of this, that it just felt very natural.
Yeah.
And it was being in the right place at the right time. And the last thing I'll share with you regarding that is, I remember someone from Weili's team said to me, funnily enough, Dana White said a couple of days ago, you need to learn English. So it was, it
Perfect
was it was
timing.
fate. It was fate, I guess.
Yeah, wow, that is really cool, man. And I'm assuming was Tommy there and he kind of helped, translate a bit.
Yes,
Uh,
yes. A huge shout out to Tommy. Yes.
Very cool. And I mean, Wiley, I've spoken with her before, back in before the Tisha Torres fight, I believe it was, and just a very nice person. Obviously, you've gotten to know her a lot better than I have, but very generous with her time. So I'm not super surprised that she was, willing to give you a chance there. And obviously, you got the credentials to go with it. But I mean, so just how has that whole experience been getting to? I mean, you're seeing her life, not just helping her learn English and all that, but the way she trains, the caliber of an athlete she is, all of that. That's got to be something in its own right. It's like two different worlds kind of colliding for you, right?
So here's the thing. I really didn't know what to expect.
Hmm.
So I've got a couple of friends who are involved in the MMA world, and for those who have been following MMA for a long time, uh, especially UK MMA, one of my coaches is Andre Winner. Now, Andre Winner was one of the first fighters in the UFC from the UK.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, you know, I've got other friends who fight as well. So I had a decent idea of the kind of life they live. But again, it's not the same as working with a world champion, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't really have any expectations. The only thing I was not afraid of, but here's the thing. So, and again, many people don't know this, but I have 3 kids. I have a family, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to leave my wife, I quit my job. I left my children for a few months. It's not easy, and I was going into something that I really didn't fully understand.
Mm-hmm.
How it was going to work, the logistics, how many hours she'll be able to commit to. So a lot of that wasn't really discussed. And we started working in October, mostly doing online lessons. And I was just getting her used to some of the sounds and getting her used to the pronunciation to relax the facial muscles.
Mm-hmm.
And we were working, I would say, 3 times a week on average, and we were doing about 45 to 60 minutes of training. Now, when I got to Beijing, you have to bear in mind, and the reason I'm emphasizing this is this. So when you relocate your entire existence to another place,
Mm-hmm.
you really want your student or your client to give it everything that they've got. So there was no point for me to relocate to Beijing if I were only going to get 30 minutes a week out of her.
Yeah,
Because there are 2 problems with this. One, it's not a very efficient use of my time. And look, this is something that I need to tell the MMA world, right? Working with a world champion, the idea of that, right, is euphoric for maybe 30 seconds. But then after that, you need to live, you need to work, you need to sort out your routine. There's a lot to do, honestly. It's not as easy as you think. So so this is what happened. So I got to Beijing, and again, you have to bear in mind we don't know each other very well. Um, we're not on those kind of terms yet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're very new to me, I'm very new to them. And we were both a little bit hesitant at first to say what we really felt. And I remember, I think it was a day or 2 later, we kind of exchanged the same idea at the same time, which was, look, why don't I just stay with you the whole day? Because I'm not doing anything at this moment in time. I don't really have any other commitments. So I could follow you throughout the day. And that would mean that we're exchanging words, exchanging ideas. You're constantly listening to, and it's as natural as it can be.
Mm-hmm.
And then what we'll do towards the end of the day, when you've done your training, you know, when you've finished your day, at the end of the day, when you've gone home, we can sit down for 60 to 90 minutes, 3 to 5 times a week, and we can study quite formally, where I'm teaching you the mechanics of the language, the grammar, the syntax, the rules.
Mm-hmm.
And that worked out really well. You see, for me, the fear was I've put myself out there. Now, if people don't see results, they're going to question. They're going to naturally, okay, so how have you been teaching her? What have you been doing? But what people don't understand is what goes on behind the scenes. And I'll be brutally honest with you, Drake.
Mm-hmm.
It's a relentless lifestyle. It's, you know, she's waking up, and again, I've got to see this for myself. So, you know, doing the 5 kilometer runs in the morning, then straight after that, the Muay Thai session, coming home, lunch, napping, session number 2, strength and conditioning or BJJ, come home, eat, study English for an hour, hour and a half, relax for an hour, go to bed, repeat 6 times a week.
Mhm.
And I'll tell you what, I got tired of just watching her.
Yeah.
I got tired of just watching her. Training 6 hours a day, 6 days a week. I was with the team for the most part 6 days a week, 5 to 6 days a week. And honestly, it's a very, very tough way of living in terms of training, the discipline you need, the kind of routine you need to have in order to be successful. And she deals with the pressure tremendously well,
Mhm.
really, really well. And I had her full commitment from the beginning. Never did I feel like, okay, this girl isn't giving it her best shot. With everything she did, every BJJ session, every strength and conditioning session, every Muay Thai session, every English lesson, she gave it everything possible.
Mhm.
And her efforts were tremendous. And I think it goes to show, it just goes to show the way she carries herself, the way she is in and outside of the cage. um, I got to see it. I got to see what makes a world champion. And I'd be lying if I said I could do it.
A definitely very special thing. That's amazing, man. And was the idea to, document things, was that kind of an idea from the beginning, or it just kind of, happened naturally with the process, like you were saying?
It was a bit of both. Okay,
Hmm.
so I can't get into the specifics of our arrangement
Hmm.
or our agreement. But what I can say is this: we had an agreement in place that worked for the both of us.
Hmm.
And for me, it was a very creative project because I had worked with language learners before, but the idea of documenting the progress was something that really interested me. And I said to Weili that when you look at Western social media, right, platforms like Instagram, platforms like YouTube, there isn't really much content. There really isn't much content of Weili.
Hmm.
Now, the MMA community is a community that becomes very invested, right? They become very invested in fighters. So I thought to myself, how awesome would it be for Weili's fans to watch this journey, the way she lives, the way she eats, the way she trains, the way she is behind the scenes, right? Weili, the daughter, Weili, the friend, Weili, the companion,
Hmm.
Weili, the fighter. All these different things are very, very interesting, and we don't really get to see much of it. I know there are a few MMA fighters who have started to, document their lives and put it out there, but you have to bear in mind, to the Chinese community, the idea of Western social media is an alien one.
Hmm.
So I thought to myself, okay, look, why don't we work together? We'll put out these videos, and it creates a certain level of interest building up to the fight itself. People get to see the journey, and for myself, I can show the world what can be done with other fighters. So for me, it was really a blueprint moving forward.
Hmm.
And it was a part of a bigger plan, which we can talk about later.
Hmm. Of course, of course. And I mean, kind of somewhat of a final note there on Wiley a little bit, but have you continued to stay in contact and maybe do online teaching with her still, or is it kind of on hold at the moment?
So at the moment, I've been in touch with her.
Hmm.
I spoke to her just last week, and she's still in the States. And her day is very simple. Waking up, I think, stretching, and having lunch, taking a nap, doing some shadow boxing,
Hmm.
going in the garden, looking at the stars, going to bed. And that's what she said to me. To be completely honest with you, here's the thing. So my original agreement with them was for 3 months. Now,
Mhm.
during that period, we did discuss studying for about a year, because that's what I think she needs. I reckon I can get her to a near native level within 12 months, especially working on in a one-to-one setting. We can really speed up the level of learning that takes place. So this is something that was discussed, but obviously the situation that we're in right now is really beyond anyone's control. So the way I've left it for the time being is I'm waiting for her to get in touch with me when she's ready to start her lessons again, because we did agree after her fight I wanted her to relax.
Mhm.
It was a very strenuous journey. There were so many things involved, and I said to her that it's only right that she takes some time out, away from training, away from learning, away from everything, and we'll pick up the lessons again when she's ready. So I'm not too sure when that's going to be, and I've kind of respected that space for the time being, and I've just been communicating with her as a friend, because I think that's what's important at this moment in time. Obviously, she's got her family in China, and mentally, I don't want to pressure someone into doing something that they may not be interested in doing at this moment in time. I don't think it's fair. She's obviously got family in China. There are some other concerns that are bigger and beyond learning English.
Mhm.
So at this moment in time, I think it's very important for those guys to relax, and when they get back to China, we can have a conversation then.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you touched on a very strenuous journey and a very strenuous end to that journey. I got to know what you
Absolutely.
thought of the fight, right? I got to hear what you thought about it, especially seeing all you saw going into it. Incredible.
It was an amazing fight. It was an amazing fight. Um, I knew Joanna was a tough opponent, and kudos to her. She was a beast. She was a beast. It was one of the best MMA fights I've ever seen. It was very entertaining. It was very back and forth. Um, what competitors? Yeah, hats off to those to the both of them. And I have nothing but respect for both fighters. And obviously, because Weili's my student, and because she's a friend, it's very easy for me to be biased. But um, it, it's look, I'm not an MMA judge. I'm not an
Yeah.
MMA judge, but I think from my understanding, um, after reading comments and reading what other people had to say about the fight, I think it was a case of sort of point fighting versus damage, and it was a very close fight. I again. Take away the fact that I'm her teacher and she's my friend, I thought she slightly edged it in terms of damage and aggression, and you know hitting with the more powerful shots, and coming forward, and the takedown attempts. And I think there was just that little bit more happening from her part. But that's not taking away from Joanna. I think she's a phenomenal fighter. Nothing but respect for her. And listen, she's win or lose. Joanna's a veteran in the sport, and I believe, like Holly Holm, like Ronda Rousey, like Amanda, these women are pioneers of the sport, and obviously Weili is amongst them as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think you said it pretty perfectly. I mean, for people who are, taking off whatever bias sunglasses they have or anything, that's
Yes.
pretty fair way to look at it. And one thing that we can all agree on, everyone who's rational anyways, that it wasn't a robbery, because I saw claims of that and I was like, that's the silliest thing I've ever seen. Close fights aren't
No, no,
robberies. So
no, I don't. It's so close. It's so close. Um, it's not fair to call it a
no,
robbery.
no, no,
I
no.
don't think so. I don't think so.
Yeah. But anyways, as for what is next for you, Ramiz, I mean, you're going to be teaching Kazmat Chimev. Is that correct? Has that begun already? What's the updates
So
with this?
here's so Hamzat
That's it.
is a phenomenal fighter, and he's Alexander
Mhm.
Gustafson's training partner. Um, Unbelievable wrestler. And I've been wrestling now for about a year, and my coach is actually from Dagestan. So I'll tell you what, man, freakish strength.
Mhm.
My coach weighs 72 kilos, and he can. I'm about 105 at the moment,
Mhm.
and he can pick me up and slam me and throw me over his head, and it's freakish strength. So that part of the world, there's something special in the water, man. There's
Mhm.
something really special in the way that they're brought up, and so I'm really excited to work with him. We've only had one lesson so far. Again, because of the coronavirus, the plan was, and again, you're going to hear it first, but the plan was to go to Sweden, do the same thing, document his life, um, document the language lessons, put it out there for the MMA community. And the plan was also to travel to Norway. I've been in touch with Jack Hermansen,
Okay.
his manager, his coach, and the plan was to spend a little bit of time with them in terms of working with the talent there, again documenting it, putting it out there, because I think we have some great talent here in Europe,
Mhm.
and I really want to get involved in terms of working with these fighters and sharing what they do, how they live, how they train, and I'd love to be able to do that. So there are a couple of other things happening which I can't speak about right now because it's still a work in progress. But I would say over the next 6 to 12 months, once the whole situation with the coronavirus settles, you can expect me to work with quite a few fighters doing the same thing.
All right, very cool. I mean, you answered kind of a couple of my last questions there. And I was curious too, because, we're talking about kind of the struggle that it really is. I mean, a big challenge, teaching somebody and going over there, like Weili, for example. So, I mean, it obviously hasn't deterred you going through that already with her. You want to continue doing kind of the same thing, right? So,
Yes.
uh, yeah, very cool. And is there anybody else that you're like somebody you want to teach? Obviously, you got these guys lined up, but somebody you're like, oh, I haven't contacted them yet, but that would be a really cool one to get.
I think two fighters I'd really love to work with. Zabit,
Hmm.
I'm not too sure whether he has a teacher in place or not, but that'd be a really exciting one. And again, I'd be willing to go to Dagestan and work with those guys. I mean, it's not easy. It's I know when I leave my family again, it's going to be as painful as it was the first time, but there's something really. I love the adventure more than anything.
Hmm.
It's doing something new, doing something exciting, experiencing a new culture, learning things, even for my own personal development, my own training. It's great working with some of these guys. So Zabit is definitely one, and Peter Yan, that would
Hmm.
be a really good one as well.
Okay, cool. Have
Uh,
you taught many
so
Russians before?
I've taught Russian students before. I have,
Hmm.
yes, mostly from Moscow,
Hmm.
but um, I've not taught anyone from Dagestan.
Okay.
Most from the capital.
Hmm. And can I leave you with a suggestion though, for a fighter?
Of course, of course.
All right. Do you know Kanako Murata, Invicta champion, Japanese champion?
No, I don't know.
Phenomenal personality, but doesn't know English yet. I think that would be a very fun one. Just for me, as a big fan of hers, that's somebody to look into. Just a very fun person. So.
Make it happen, Drake. Make it
All right,
happen.
yeah, I'll set you guys up.
More than I'd be more than happy to get involved.
Awesome, she's great. But anyways, man, thank you so much. It was really awesome getting to pick your brain about this stuff because it's something, a little bit personal for me, having gone through the journey, not obviously the same level, but trying to attempt it, getting to China. At least I made it there. So that was cool. Um,
That's it. That's it. That's it.
yeah.
I mean, even look, sometimes, God, the amount of times I've tried something and failed. Honestly, we could spend hours talking about it, but it's all a part of the journey, right? It's all a part of the journey. It's all a part of growing as a person, as a professional. And the fact that, I mean, not many people can say that they went to China, they lived there for a month, they got to adjust, they got to experience a new culture, they got to see a part of the world that, had they not taken, you know, the step to move forward, they wouldn't have experienced anything. So for me, it's all about building experiences. Whether things work out or they don't work out, it's not the way I look at it. It's never the way I've looked at it. I've always seen it as, I know it's a very strange way to put it, and it's not like, I sit around campfires and share stories, but that's
Mm.
what comes to my mind. You know, if we ever came to a stage where we had to live in, you know, the middle of the desert, um, you definitely entertain people with, some of the things that you've done and some of the things that, and the reason I say that, because actually, I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but
Oh, good. We got
a
time.
friend of mine, a friend of mine, this is very, very interesting, right?
Hmm.
And this was at the back of my mind when I was saying this. A friend of mine wanted to study, Arabic, and, what he did is actually insane. So he went to live in the middle of the desert, for about a year, and he picked up Arabic. And honestly, he's a white British lad, from Lancashire, and honestly, he speaks like an Arab.
Really?
And one of the ways he learned Arabic was this. He said, Ramiz, what these people did was literally, at the end of the day, they'd set up a campfire, they'd sit around and they'd just share stories. And that's how he picked up the language. So again, it's very interesting, and there was some of that I used, when I was teaching Weili. I was just telling her about random things,
Hmm.
how I grew up, my city, what I went through, my childhood, um, and it's interesting, it's engaging, as opposed to, okay,
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds.
working with sort of formulae. It's way more natural. But yeah, that was a random story to share, but
Love
there
it.
you go.
Love it, man. Thank you. It's been amazing. I'm so happy that I got to talk to you. Really
Thank you
love.
for reaching out, Drake. Thank you.
Yes, love the stuff that you've been doing on your channel and everything. And I mean, if there's something that I've been missing or not following, feel free to plug it right now and tell us where we can see your stuff.
Thank you so much. So, you've already mentioned, teach, train, and travel. At the moment, because I'm just at home, it's
Hmm.
difficult for me to record and get content out there. But once this situation is over, you can expect me to be putting out more material, working with other fighters. And if you're interested in the language side of things, and you're also interested in the MMA side of things, then is definitely a channel you should follow, and support as much as you can.
Hmm. And of course, if you guys want to follow Ramiz on his Instagram, he's always posting these great desserts that are always killing me. Your stories.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's actually my sister's business,
Oh,
so,
okay.
I try and support her where I can.
Very awesome.